Hey, what's up everybody? David Wood here for DavidWoodFX.blogspot.com and NoiseJunkies.net to bring you another exciting Photoshop tutorial, and this is the last tutorial in my Teen Titans special effects series. Today's effect will be creating something a little different. This is kind of like a magical spell, dark energy power, I guess you could call it. And it's based off of the character Jinx in Teen Titans that uses her powers. They basically give the other characters bad luck. And this is what the effect is going to look like when we're finished with it. It's sort of this high intensity energy flying out from this character's hands, and there's this distortion effect going on in the background. So let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. I'm going to open up my main image in Photoshop, and this is just a stock image I found on DeviantArt, and I will put the link to it in the description for you guys. And the first thing to do is to make a couple of textures with which we'll use later. I won't say what for just yet. So to start things off with, we'll just create a new blank layer. Take the paint bucket tool, and under the patterns you want to open up this little tab here and go down to patterns, and if this comes up, hit OK. And in here we want to choose this one right here, the satin pattern, and we'll just fill it with a selection just like that. Then we'll go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to save these to my desktop. I'm just going to save this as Displacement 1, and I want to uncheck the layers box right there. I don't want it to save as individual layers, I just want it to be a flat single image file, and it will tell you that it must be saved as a copy, and hit save. And when that's done, then you can go to edit, step backwards, and that will undo the fill, and then we'll go back to the patterns and we'll bring down that little menu again, and this time we're going to choose the texture fill, and in here we want to choose this first one right here called clouds and fill that in, and we'll do the same thing. We'll save this one as well. Only this one we're going to save as Displacement 2. And do the same thing, uncheck the layers, and it will save as a copy. Now, alternatively, you can go to a texture site, such as CG Textures. They've got a lot of great stuff. And you can go under the Skies Partial tab, and you can download different images, which you can use as displacement maps as well. But we're just going to use the Photoshop patterns for this. We'll just remove the pattern from that layer. First thing to do is to duplicate the background layer. So select the layer and hit Ctrl J. Then we can use that layer that we had used the patterns on, and we're just going to fill the background in with black and turn the layer off. Then we'll create another layer and come up here to our swatches tab, and we're going to choose this pure magenta color, and then we'll choose the polygonal lasso tool, and we're going to draw a sort of a half circle around where we want the effect to go. So this guy, he's looking off in this direction, so probably be somewhere down here. Depending on what angle it is, it will change where you place it, and this isn't going to be a very close proximity, but that's okay. And just draw a shape out like this. Doesn't have to be perfect, and then connect it back so it's sort of a half circle or a smile, and hit Alt Backspace and fill that in with that magenta color, and then Control D to deselect. And then we can go to Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and in here we want to give it a blur of somewhere between 3 and 5 should work. It works well for this size image. Depending on how big your image is, it will change how much blur you use. And hit OK. And then we can turn on that black solid beneath it just so we can see what we're doing. And the first thing to do is take the magenta layer. We'll name that one Effect, and we'll duplicate that by hitting Ctrl J. And we'll just turn off the top one for now. And we'll choose the bottom one. Hold down the Alt key and click Filters, and then choose Gaussian Blur again, and that will bring it up. And we're going to give this one a higher blur, somewhere between 10 and 15. Now what we'll do is we'll start displacing this effect. So we'll go to Filters, Distort, Displace, and in here we are going to set the horizontal scale. In this case, something around 10 works pretty well, 10 by 10, and hit OK. And I'm going to choose the second displacement map. The second one was that clouds pattern. And this will just give it a soft appearance like that. Go to Filters, Distorts, Displace again, and we'll displace it by 10 by 10 as well. And hit OK. And we'll choose the first displacement map, and you can see that really added some texture to that. If we are satisfied with that, we'll leave it alone, but you can displace it by more maps or different values if you want. I think I'll do this one just once more, and maybe increase it much higher. This is going to be the displacement effect that trails behind the main effect. So we can turn the other one back on, and we'll do the same thing. Choose something like 10 by 10, displace it, and then do the same thing and displace it by the other one. But just something like that to give it a kind of crazy texture. And then we can move these layers around a little bit just to situate them better. And we can duplicate that bottom effect layer, and we can displace it even more. The goal of this is just to kind of add some cloud stuff behind it, and we can change the opacity of some of these too. So we want it just to kind of fade out. Once we do that, then we can take these layers and merge them together, and then we can double click on the layer, and we'll start playing with layer styles. So the first thing we want to do is add an inner glow. So go to that tab, set the color to white, hit OK, opacity at 100%, blend mode on add, and we want to change the source from edge to center, and we can adjust the size until we like it. I think a size of about 3 works good for this particular case. And then we'll add an outer glow as well, and we'll set this up, and we'll try to use the same kind of magenta color for that and increase the size, something around 50 or 60, and we'll lower the opacity to 50%. And the blend mode, we'll just put that on normal. That looks pretty good. Hit OK. We can turn off that black solid beneath it, set the blend mode on screen, and see how that looks. And it's a little lackluster in this particular case. So instead what we'll do is we'll set the blend mode back on normal, turn the black layer back on, and we'll merge this layer onto the black solid, and then set the blend mode on screen. And it doesn't do a whole lot of difference, it makes it look a little bit better. But what we want to do is just boost it and give it some more color. So we'll go to Image, Adjustments, Curves, and we'll just pump up the RGB channel a little bit. Set the blend mode back on screen. We can even try setting it on add. Add looks pretty good, but then it gets these sharp edges in here which don't look as nice. So instead, setting it on screen and then just duplicating the layer, that sometimes will work. Or you can duplicate the layer and blur that as well, and blur that by like 20 to 30. And setting that on add, we'll just kind of brighten it up and make it look better. So I think this effect is pretty good for where we are. Again, playing around with it until you like it. You got to do a lot of experimenting, but I think this is coming along pretty good. And now what we'll do is we'll add the turbulent effect to the background. So we'll go to Filters, Distort Displace, and we just want something small, so about 7 by 7 should work. It might even go lower than that, because in my previous experiments with this it came out kind of strong. And we'll choose the second displacement map, that cloud-like one, because the other one, the edges on it are a lot sharper. And then we'll add a layer mask to this layer, and we will fill it with black. Now what we can do is turn off the layer below it, so you can't see anything. Right-click and choose Disable Layer Mask. Turn on the main effect. Choose the polygonal lasso tool again, and on the layer mask, draw a path around where his fingers are and around the main effect. So, and try to get a little bit on the other side of his hand. Selecting that layer mask, clicking on it will undo the disable effect, and we want to fill that in with white just to make that effect visible, and then Control D to deselect it. And if we turn off our effect, this is all that we see. We just see the effect on his hand. And if you turn on the bottom layer, there's an edge running through the photo where the displaced layer meets the original photo, and it looks a little goofy, so we'll try to clean that up. So we'll select the layer mask, choose Filters, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we just want to set a blur of around 3 or 4. Might even go lower. Hit OK. And this will also give us a goofy edge. If we were to look in here, like right in here on his finger, you can see where the effect is now. and where the original is. So what we'll do is we're going to select the displacement map, and we're going to displace that as well. So again, filters, distort, displace, and about 10 by 10 should help the edge out a lot. Hit OK. Choose the second displacement map again, and right away you can see a difference if I undo that. You can see it right around his mouth and his hand here. You can see it down here in the rock where there's this fading edge. It's now gone. And then we can go to filters, distort, displace again, and just give it a smaller amount and use the other displacement map. We just want to match the displacement of the main effect. So that looks pretty good. And once that is done, that is essentially all there is to the tutorial. A few things is on this blurred layer here that acts as a glow. We can get rid of some of the white in here. It's making it too bright right through here. So we can just bring up our color balance, and just working on the highlights we can boost that up a little bit. And you can try it with preserve luminosity on or off. That doesn't look too bad. But it's still showing through right here. It's still kind of light. So we can just take a fuzzy brush and set the blend mode on overlay. And using a low opacity of around 50, we can just kind of darken that area up right in there. And then set it back on add. And that helps a lot. And you can go over it several times just to see how that looks. But that looks pretty good. The last thing to do is, of course, color correct it. So to color correct it, we can use an adjustment layer, which if we add an adjustment layer on here, we can play with the effects. And I want to bring in some of these warmer tones that you see in the grass and the rocks, so we'll lower the blue a little bit and then increase the green and the red. And that will help blend it in better. It will just make the scene look a lot better. Because compared to that, where nothing is matching, the effect doesn't match the background, it stands out a lot. So adding a little bit of a color correction treatment to it, it helps sell the effect and get it back into place like it should be, just like that. So, that is all there is to that effect. I hope you guys found something useful from it. As always, be sure to check out our blog, noisejunkies.net, and be sure to try other textures as well. You can use these cloud elements, or you can even use flame elements in there as well, adding a little bit of that to the final image. That is it for this tutorial. I'm David Wood, DavidWoodFX for noisejunkies.net, and I will see you guys next time.